It started with a message, nothing special, just a casual, "Hey, are you still around this weekend?" sent late on a Thursday night. The sender? Drew, my best friend's older brother. The guy I'd had a low-key crush on since I was 17. The guy who used to pick us up from soccer practice in his beat-up Ford, blast Blink 182 like it was still 2005, and ruffle my hair in that big brotherly way that made my stomach twist. We hadn't talked in a while. He was 3 years older, always just out of reach. Already in college when I was still figuring out how to fake confidence in the locker room. So when I saw his name pop up on my phone, I froze. And then I replied, "Yeah, I'm here. What's up?" He responded a minute later. "You still good with fixing laptops?" My Mac's totally fried. That was his in. My weird tech skills. I'd fixed his old PS4 once, and apparently that made me the go-to IT guy in his mental phone book. "Yeah, I can take a look," I replied. "What's wrong with it?" "It won't turn on. Just went black. No idea what happened. Could be the battery or logic board. Bring it over." He sent a thumbs up and said, "Tomorrow, okay?" "Sure." Then I sat there, staring at my phone, heart pounding like I'd just been asked out. Spoiler, I hadn't. But still, he was coming over. To my place. Not his brother's, not his parents', mine. And that felt like something. The next afternoon, I cleaned my whole apartment like he was a health inspector. Wiped down surfaces I hadn't touched in weeks. Rearranged books and game controllers to look casually lived in. Sprayed cologne like a teenager on a first date. When the knock finally came, it was like a movie scene. Slow motion, my breath caught in my throat as I opened the door. There he was, Drew Mason, hair slightly longer than I remembered, pushed back in that, I don't care but it still looks perfect way. Faded jeans, black t-shirt, a canvas tote over one shoulder, and a silver laptop under his arm. "Hey man," he said, smiling wide. "Hey." I stepped aside to let him in, trying not to stare at the way his shirt clung to his back when he passed me. He dropped the laptop on the kitchen table. "Thanks for doing this. I swear, if I lose all my files, I'm gonna cry." I gave a half laugh. "I'll do my best to avoid the tears." He grinned. "I'm trusting you." That did something to me. I sat down, opened the laptop, and began the usual ritual, checking the charger, testing for signs of life, pressing keys, while pretending not to be hyper-aware of him leaning against the counter, watching me. "What have you been up to lately?" I asked. "Not much. Teaching sucks right now. The kids are fine, but admin's a nightmare. I keep thinking I should just go back to school or move somewhere else." "You're still teaching English, right?" "Yeah, seniors, which is basically babysitting hormonal adults." I glanced up. "Sounds about right." He laughed and stretched, arms overhead. My eyes flicked up. Shoulders, forearms, a hint of skin above his waistband. I looked away fast. He didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't say anything. After a few minutes, I diagnosed the problem. Battery wasn't charging properly. Maybe a busted cable or power port. I had a spare charger and offered to test it. When I plugged it in, the screen flickered to life. "Dude," he said, leaning over my shoulder, "you're a wizard." "It's not fixed yet, just powered on." "I'll take it." I could feel his breath against my neck, his shoulder brushing mine. I didn't move. And then he said it. "You always this good with your hands?" It could have been a joke. It probably was a joke. But my brain lit up like a Christmas tree. I turned slowly, heart pounding. "Are you flirting with me?" He blinked, caught. "What?" I raised an eyebrow, not backing down. "You just said?" He laughed nervously, straightening up. "No, man, I was just kidding. Sorry. Didn't mean to make it weird." "Not weird," I said quickly. "Just unexpected." There was a pause. Then he said, "Wait, are you?" And there it was. I nodded. "Yeah, I am." He looked surprised, but not freaked out. Just surprised. "Damn. I didn't know. I don't really advertise it." "No, yeah, totally." Another pause. Then he asked, "How long?" "Since forever, probably." He nodded slowly. "Wow. Then, so when I used to pick you guys up from practice and you rode shotgun? I gave him a look. Yes, I probably had a crush on you. His face went red. No way, I grinned. You wore sleeveless shirts. What did you expect? He laughed, covering his face with one hand. Oh my God. Don't worry, I said, still smiling. It was harmless. He looked at me, eyes sharp, but soft. Was? I opened my mouth. Closed it. He tilted his head. Damn! Okay. The air in the room shifted, charged. He didn't step back. I didn't either. And I had no idea what would happen next. I didn't expect him to bring it up again. After that moment, me admitting I liked him back then, him going red and laughing it off, I figured we'd just shift gears. Talk about his laptop, the weather, anything else. But he didn't move. He stood there, still leaning against the edge of the table, looking at me like he was trying to solve a riddle. And I wasn't sure if I should be flattered or preparing to make a joke and diffuse whatever this weird tension was. So, he said, voice lower, what happens now? I shrugged. With the laptop? I replaced the battery or cleaned the charging port. Should be a quick fix. He gave a soft laugh. That's not what I meant. Oh, right. I cleared my throat. Nothing happens. You came here for tech support, not this. He tilted his head. This? I waved vaguely between us. Whatever this energy is. He didn't look away. You feel it too? That question hit harder than I expected. I stood up, trying to keep my tone even. Drew, you're straight. He opened his mouth, then closed it, frowned. Yeah, he said slowly. At least I thought I was. I blinked. Wait, what? He rubbed the back of his neck. I mean, I've only ever dated girls, but I've been thinking about stuff lately. Stuff I never let myself really think about before. I stared at him, unsure if this was some kind of joke. You can't just decide to experiment with your little brother's best friend, I said, more defensive than I meant to be. He winced. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing? There was a beat of silence. Then, I'm trying to be honest, he said. That shut me up. Because Drew, cool, collected, always in control Drew, looked nervous. Not in a performative way. In a real, palms, slightly sweaty, voice a little too careful way. I didn't know how to process that. So I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge like it held answers. Grabbed 2 sodas, handed him one. He took it wordlessly. We stood in the kitchen, 2 feet apart, sipping like it was a standoff. Finally, he said, You're right, I didn't come here for this. But I'm also not pretending I don't feel whatever this is. I exhaled. It's not nothing, but it could just be nostalgia, or curiosity, or the fact that you're in between girlfriends and I happen to be here. He nodded, slowly. Fair. We stared at each other. Then he asked, Can I ask you something real? Sure. Did you ever think about it? Back then? Us? I looked away. Yeah, a lot. He didn't speak for a long time after that. Just stood there, like he was sitting with that truth. And then he said something I didn't expect. I used to look at you too. I turned, startled. What? He shrugged, eyes flicking down to the floor. I didn't know what it meant back then. You were just easy to be around. You made me laugh. And sometimes, when I dropped you off, I'd sit in my car for a minute after, thinking about you. My throat went dry. You never said anything, I whispered, because I didn't understand it. And then I moved away. Dated girls. Got busy. I nodded slowly. He looked up. But I still remember the first time I saw you with your first boyfriend. I blinked. How? Instagram. You were tagged in some photo, holding hands. Oh, he gave a small smile. I was jealous. Didn't know why at the time. Just felt off. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to believe him. The other part was terrified too. He stepped closer, just slightly. I'm not saying I know what I'm doing. I'm just saying I haven't stopped thinking about this since I walked in. I met his eyes. What are you thinking now? He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned in, slow, deliberate. I didn't move. His hand grazed mine, lightly, tentatively, like he was waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. And then, just as slowly, he pulled back. Okay, he said softly. That's enough honesty for one day. I swallowed, pulse racing. Yeah, but he didn't move away. He just stood there, our hands almost touching on the counter. Neither of us said anything for a long time. Finally, he broke the silence. You're still fixing the laptop though, right? That made me laugh. Yeah, I said. I'm still fixing the laptop. The rest of the afternoon played out in this weird in-between state. Like we'd both cracked something open, but neither of us knew what to do with it. Drew stayed. He sat on the couch while I took his laptop apart at the kitchen table, his long legs stretched out, eyes half watching the muted TV. Every so often, I'd feel him glance over, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the right opening. I didn't push. I kept my hands busy with the battery swap and logic board check. I knew how to navigate broken hardware better than whatever was happening between us. After about an hour, I closed the laptop and looked up. Should be good now. Might run a little warm until the thermal paste settles, but it's working. He nodded and stood up, walking over. When he picked it up and pressed the power button, it glowed to life. You're a genius, he said, and then, softer, thanks. No problem. He didn't leave right away. He just stood there, laptop in hand, like he didn't know what to do next. Then, without looking at me, he asked, You want to go for a walk or something? I blinked. Now? Yeah, it's nice out. I just don't feel like going home yet. I could have said no. I could have told him I had work or dinner plans or something else, but I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my hoodie and we left. We walked in silence for the first few minutes. The sun was low, casting everything in that golden hour glow that made even cracked sidewalks look beautiful. We ended up at this little park, a few blocks away. One of those pocket-sized green spaces with a fountain, a couple benches, and a few trees that were already starting to change color. Drew sat down on the edge of the fountain. I sat next to him. He tapped his fingers on his thigh for a moment and said, Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think you would have told me? Back then? I didn't need him to explain. You mean about liking you? Yeah, I looked out at the trees. No, I don't think I would have. Why not? Because you were my friend's older brother. Because you were straight. Because I didn't want to be that cliché. He nodded slowly. But you felt it. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Yeah, I felt it. He looked down at his hands. I think I felt something too, he said. I just didn't have the language for it, or the space to explore it. Everything in my life was about girls and sports and keeping things easy. You weren't easy. I turned to him. Thanks? He smiled. You know what I mean. I nodded. Yeah. There was a pause. A long one. Then, almost shyly, he said, I don't want to mess things up. With you. Or with my brother. That made my chest twist. I'm not asking you for anything, Drew. You don't owe me anything. Whatever this is, it doesn't have to mean something if you're not ready for that. He shook his head. I think that's the problem. I do want it to mean something. I stared at him. Then say that. He looked at me. I'm saying it. There it was. No more hedging. No more awkward pauses. He was saying it. I didn't know what to do with that. So I stood up, walked a few steps away, just to breathe. When I turned back, he was watching me, open, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen from him before. I'm scared, he said. Of what? He shrugged. changing how people see me, getting it wrong, hurting you. I took a slow breath. Then don't rush it. We can figure it out. Or we can not. But don't do it just because it's convenient. He stood too. It's not convenient. It's terrifying. And then he added, but I can't stop thinking about what it'd be like. You, me, something real. We stood there, a few feet apart, under a tree that had already started to drop leaves onto the grass. Then, slowly, carefully, he stepped toward me. And for the first time, he reached out and touched my wrist. Just a light touch. I didn't pull away. He didn't say anything else, neither did I. But I stayed. We didn't kiss that day. He didn't lean in. I didn't close the space. But something about the way he touched my wrist, the way he looked at me, like I was something he hadn't let himself want until now, left me rattled. When we walked back to my place, it was quiet. But not awkward. More like cautious. Like we'd both said enough for one afternoon and needed space to let it sink in. At my door, he hesitated. You got plans tonight? He asked. Not really. Mind if I stay for a bit? My brain fired off a dozen responses, but all I said was, yeah, that's fine. We slipped inside. He dropped onto the couch, kicked off his shoes, and sank back like he lived there. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a couple of beers, and sat down next to him. A show was playing in the background, one of those trashy dating things where everyone's shirtless and fighting for attention. He wasn't watching it. Neither was I. After a while, he asked, you still talk to my brother much? Not really. He moved to Denver, got married. We text maybe once a month. Yeah, he said, nodding. He called me last week, told me you were still in town, said I should reach out. I looked over. So this wasn't totally random? He smiled sheepishly. Not totally. That made something warm flicker in my chest. You think he'd care? I asked. If he knew? Yeah, he paused. Honestly? Probably. But not for the reason you think. What reason then? He always said you were the only guy he trusted around me. He looked over. Guess the irony isn't lost on me. We both laughed. Soft, nervous. Then, without warning, he asked, can I crash here tonight? I blinked. Like, sleep over? Yeah. Couch is fine. I don't feel like being alone. I wanted to ask why. I didn't. Instead, I said, sure, I'll grab a blanket. By the time I came back, he was already lying down. Hoodie off. Just in a t-shirt now. He looked younger like that. Less sure of himself. Like maybe he was still figuring it all out one thought at a time. You good? I asked. He nodded. Thanks for letting me stay. No problem. I turned to go. Wait, he said, sitting up slightly. I looked back. Will you stay out here for a bit? Just until I fall asleep? I hesitated, then nodded. I sat back on the couch. He shifted so there was a bit more room, legs curled up, eyes already drifting closed. We didn't talk, but after a while his fingers brushed mine under the blanket. And this time he didn't pretend it was an accident. I woke up with a crick in my neck and a warm weight still pressed lightly against my side. It took a few seconds to register where I was, that I hadn't fallen asleep alone, that Drew had shifted sometime during the night and was now curled up close, his hand resting on my chest, his leg brushing mine, and that I hadn't moved. The TV was still on, some late-night show looping quietly, but everything else was still. I looked down at him. His face was relaxed, mouth slightly parted, hair a little messy from sleep. He didn't look like the same guy who used to smirk and toss footballs across school fields. He looked softer, more real. I should have moved, should have nudged him awake or slipped away, but I didn't, because it didn't feel like a mistake. After a few minutes he stirred, his fingers twitched. Then his eyes blinked open, squinting against the low light. He looked up at me, and for a second there was a flash of panic in his face. But it passed. Morning, I said, voice still groggy. Morning. He shifted back slightly, sitting up a little, rubbing his face. Sorry. Didn't mean to cling like that. It's okay, I said quickly. You didn't. He looked at me, eyes searching. I didn't? I hesitated. Then, softer, I didn't mind. The way his shoulders relaxed after that, like he'd been holding something in, said more than any words. I slept better than I have in weeks, he muttered. Good. He stretched, then leaned back into the couch cushions, this time facing me fully. You ever wake up and forget what day it is? He asked. Yeah, all the time. Feels like Sunday, he said. But not the bad kind, like the quiet kind. Before everything kicks back in. I nodded. I know what you mean. Then he said, I've been thinking about that moment yesterday. In the park, I met his gaze. Yeah, I wanted to kiss you, I swallowed. I know, but I didn't. I know that too. He paused. Do you think it would have been a mistake? I didn't answer right away. Then I said, No, I don't. He looked at me for a long time. And then, slowly, he leaned forward. Not fast. Not bold. Just enough. Our foreheads touched first. A moment of stillness. Breath shared between two people, still figuring out what the hell this was. Then, with a kind of fragile certainty, he kissed me. It was soft. Careful. Like he was asking a question with his mouth. And I answered by kissing him back. When we pulled apart, we didn't speak. We just sat there. Forehead to forehead, the world outside still quiet and untouched. Whatever this was, it wasn't a joke, and it definitely wasn't over. After the kiss, neither of us said much. Not because there wasn't anything to say, but because whatever that moment had been, we were both still inside it. Drew leaned back against the couch cushion, exhaled slowly and rubbed the back of his neck like the weight of it was still settling in. I wasn't planning on that, he said quietly. I know. But I'm glad it happened. That made something shift in my chest. I nodded, unsure what to say. My heart was still racing, but not in a bad way. Just the kind of fast you get when something real finally lands. He stayed for breakfast, which, let's be honest, was just frozen waffles and bad coffee. But we sat across from each other at the tiny kitchen table like it meant something. And it did. Because neither of us reached for our phones. Neither of us rushed to leave. It felt like the beginning of something. Careful. Unspoken. Real. Around noon, he finally stood up, stretching like he didn't want to go. I should probably get going, he said. And then, after a beat, unless, I raised an eyebrow. Unless what? Unless you're doing something later. I'm not. He smiled, a little shy. Cool. He walked toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. I've never done this before, he said without turning around. What? Stayed the night? He shook his head, half smiling. No. This. I stood. I know. He finally turned to face me. And I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to keep seeing you. If that's something you want too. It was the most straightforward he'd been since this all started. So I didn't make it complicated. I do, I said. I want that. His face softened. Just a little. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the sunlight. But before the door could close behind him, he leaned back in. One more kiss. Shorter this time. Surer. I'll text you, he said. And then he was gone. But this time, it didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the start. Drew texted later that afternoon. Nothing heavy, just a simple, still thinking about this morning. You free tonight? I stared at it for a second, heart skipping. Yeah. Come over whenever. He showed up just after 7, carrying takeout and looking a little nervous. But the second I opened the door, it melted. The way he looked at me, it wasn't unsure anymore. We ate on the couch, legs brushing occasionally, laughed a lot, talked about stupid movies we loved as kids, bands we used to pretend we hated. It was easy, comfortable. But beneath all that ease, there was something simmering. A new kind of gravity pulling between us. At some point, we weren't watching the movie anymore. He shifted closer, eyes flicking between mine and my mouth like he was still double-checking. I was okay with this. I leaned in first this time. The kiss was deeper than before, more confident. It didn't feel like he was testing the waters anymore. It felt like he'd already decided he wanted to swim. Eventually, his hand found the side of my neck, thumb tracing slow circles, and I let my fingers curl into the hem of his shirt. The space between us disappeared. He pulled back, just enough to whisper, "I've been wanting this all day." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I just kissed him again. We ended up in my bed, not rushed, not for the sake of doing it. It was slow, intentional, the kind of closeness that comes with real curiosity, not about bodies, but about what it means to be seen and wanted and safe, all at once. He wasn't just curious. He was present. Every movement, every glance. He was there, and not just physically. After, we lay there in the half-dark, tangled up and quiet, his head on my chest, my fingers tracing lazy lines down his back. "I never thought I'd do this," he murmured. "Not just with a guy, but with you. You regret it?" He shook his head against my shoulder. "No, just surprised it feels this natural." I kissed his forehead. "Same." We didn't label anything that night. No boyfriend talk, no grand declarations. Just warmth, honesty, something real beginning. Eventually, he fell asleep. And I stayed awake for a while, just listening to his breath, feeling the weight of him beside me. Not a crush anymore, not a fantasy, but something real. He stayed the whole weekend, and when he left Monday morning, he didn't say "see you later" like people do when they're being polite. He said, "I'll call you after work," and then he kissed me like he already missed me.